What's up, writers? Today, we are going to begin our work toward this final project we've been talking about. It's been a long journey. Some of you have read your book multiple times. Some of you, this might be your fourth read through because you did really like this book. And some of you have been struggling to get through this first read. I understand. We're all in different places. I would say, regardless of where we're at, if you haven't read it at least one complete time during this time, we need to do that. That needs to happen now because we have one lesson left that we're going to be really focusing on before we start to consider details about the website and companion book. But today's our first step really towards that project. We're starting it today. So, just like when we've started things before, it's really important that we consider structure. Structure could look like this chart in front of us. And this chart in front of us should be very familiar. You should recognize it from your teen activism unit last year, where we wrote books, chapter books, and we made table of contents that help set up what we'd be writing. And we're going to do something similar today. We're going to end up making a table of contents. But our table of contents are going to be a little bit more in depth and quality than probably what we did last year because now we're 7th graders. And so the only thing that I've added to this is that sometimes we use a combination of what we see here. So we're going to take a look first at this example that's already made for us that is from the Hunger Games. So let's consider what structures we actually see here. So first of all, I notice chapter 1, talking about the whole trilogy. That's definitely going to be chronology, I would say. Why would they start with the end? I'm sure they start with the first things and continue on through. Now, chapter 2, asking the question, could the Hunger Games really happen? To me, that sounds like definition. In other words, like making an opinion. You're claiming something. And I think that that's actually a pretty cool idea. Continuing on, hunger, starving in the districts. I could see that being problem and solution. Maybe the problem is that there's hunger, and then how are people overcoming that food problem? Although we'd have to see that chapter to know. Next, we've got tributes, weapons, and I assume torture and execution. Those are all classifications for how these things happen. In other words, the different types of weapons, the different kinds of tributes from which district, and then the different ways that people end up dying in the Hunger Games, which is crazy that they would actually bother making a chapter about that. But anyways, the final two, President Snow and his cronies, the nature of evil. Talking about the nature of evil makes me wonder if this is, again, some sort of definition chapter where we have this big idea we're considering, but it could also be boxes and bullets where we've got the different sort of bad guys all sort of described here so we understand them. Finally, killer kids, how responsible are they? Again, that feels like some sort of definition chapter where we are considering whether kids would be responsible in this sort of situation. We're making some sort of claim. So now we want to try together to plan out what sections and chapters we would use. And to do that, we'll consider what was most important from our thoughts from the past. And we'll use Stolen Party as an example. So we want to ask ourselves, what is important to say about the text? When we read it, what did we really get out of it? What were some of the big thoughts that we had? And what thoughts could actually become chapters? So what are some possible chapters? Think to yourself for a moment. I know the first thing that I think about is that we need to have some chapters focused on Rosara, specifically her and her relationships, because she seems to have an interesting one with her mother, at least from her perspective. I think it's probably a pretty typical one where a parent says something is one way because of their wisdom and their experience in the world, and the kid is sort of like, you don't understand how things are, as if somehow this kid has more experience than the mother. And wouldn't we know it that it turns out the mother was right? Shocking, right? I'm sure we can't relate to that at all, our parents being right about something when we said they'd be wrong. So, probably a chapter about Rosara and her mother. Also, big influences on her that are important to the story are that whole Ines family. So, Luciana, the cousin, Senora Ines, absolutely. You know, the magic show is pretty important, but I'm not quite sure how we could do that. We could talk about the magician. We could talk about why that really mattered. And it did matter. Now that I've considered the story, it absolutely was huge. And we wouldn't want to forget two super important aspects or story elements, because so far we've definitely thought a lot about relationships, but story elements. We spent a whole day considering how story elements were related, and we said the kitchen story element, of, like the setting of the kitchen, really affected Rosara. She felt different there. She was special, and she had joy. Unfortunately, it turned out to not be joy later on, but while she was there, she was happy. And so we'd probably want to talk about the importance of the kitchen. That might be a whole chapter, why it's so important, because that was a big thought that we had. In other words, when you look back at your writing about your reading, you're going to want to consider, what big thoughts have I had? And finally, the most important part is where everything gets turned upside down. To steal a line from one of my favorite shows as a kid, like, the ending is just so good. It's so good because you see it coming and you hope it's not going to happen. It's like when that slow motion thing happens, like this morning. This is so dumb. I was eating something and there was ranch that I was eating. Well, I wasn't just eating ranch, although it's not a bad idea. But the ranch was next to what I was eating because I was dipping in it. And I'm listening to something with my earbuds. And of course, as I'm fumbling with it, I can just slowly see falling out of my hands is my earbuds cable. And it's just getting magnetically pulled towards the ranch pool, the small ranch pool. There's so much space around it, but there's that ranch pool. And this twisted up cable is like a heat-sinking missile just finding that ranch. And it just got so covered in it. It was so disgusting. I'm sure I had a really good reason for that. And if I go back and watch this video, I bet I'd see it, but I don't even remember now. Why was I talking about that? Oh, slow motion. We can see that this is about to happen. We hope it's not, just like I was hoping that hedgehog cable was not going to fall in the ranch, but it absolutely did. Just like we were hoping that Rosara was really friends with that whole family. But we had a pretty strong feeling that that was not the case. And we see at the end there that $2 made a big difference in the story. So if we consider what possible chapters we want to include in our table of contents, these are the things I thought of. Mother, the Ines family, the magician. But notice those relationships are all stacked up there in the beginning, from the ones we first see to the later ones that we see, as far as when they first appear in the book. And then we've broken it down into some more like story element things that were big ideas for us. We considered on our paper the significance of the kitchen. Later on, I realized the magic show was just more than a magic show. And I realized that because a student had talked to me about, why is it called Stolen Party? It wasn't Rosara's party. No, but as the main character, that was what she was looking for. She was looking for, or looking forward to, that magic show that whole time. The monkey That was the first line. A monkey at a birthday party? Get away with you, believing such nonsense, you're told. So the magic show was what she was looking forward to. Seeing a monkey disappear. Did she see it? No. She had to be the assistant in the magic show. She was totally not a part of the party. It was stolen from her. And I'd love to get into more detail about why the magic show mattered, but it absolutely did. It's crazy how much it mattered. And then finally, we have the pivotal part of the story when she gets offered the money. So the next step is, how will you make a table of contents? Because I just showed you how I made mine. And here's how I think you should make yours. We'll plan a table of contents by looking back at your entries in your journal. Just like we thought back to what we had considered about Stolen Party, that was sort of like our mental journal. We talked about a lot of things. So in your journal, I'm sure that you've considered a lot of different ideas. And so it's going to be up to you to consider how those different ideas are going to be sorted out into chapters. I think it's perfectly reasonable to think that you're going to have some based on relationships like I did, and then you're going to have some that are bigger ideas like definition chapters where you make a claim and then try to support it. Finally, I think the overarching thing you'll need to consider after you've looked over your entries, considered, is there a reason why I'm making these chapters? I think the thing we need to keep coming back to is, what are the most important parts of this book? Was there a twist at the end of yours? Then that probably needs to be a chapter that's talked about and considered and focused on. What most important parts of your book are there, and are they getting into the chapters? Okay. So our goal by the end of your time today should be have a table of contents that's good enough. I think having 4 chapters is a great start, and that might be all you need. But don't be afraid to combine and divide any of those chapters. Don't be afraid to move chapters around. Whatever you do, just make sure you have a reason for it. Make sure you've used logic in deciding where are my chapters going to go based upon what was most important from the book. All right, writers. Hope you enjoy making those table of contents. When you do, start drafting one of those chapters. See if it's going to be what you want it to be now rather than later. And until I see you next time, happy writing.